So when I lost my dad, and when I was 18 years old, from that place of grief, now you know what loss is like.
Right.
So this is not your opportunity to make other people feel bad that they have a dad. This is not your opportunity to make people feel bad that you had a harder childhood than them and you're feeling sorry for yourself. Like, this is your opportunity from a place of knowledge, because you've seen death and you've survived through it, because you've seen grief and you've lived to talk about it. We have to acknowledge that it's hard for a lot of people. Some people, Christmas is a time of remembering what they don't have. They're experiencing loss of loved ones, maybe someone they lost this year, maybe a relationship they lost this year, maybe someone they lost 20, 30 years ago, but this time is like a constant reminder that they don't have what it seems like everyone else has. And I think we have to acknowledge it, talk about it, and hopefully encourage people right where they are, if that is where they are. I remember the first Christmas without my dad. Specifically, my dad passed away right before Easter. So I remember the first Easter without him. It was a week after Easter. It was such a trip to try to reconcile what this holiday meant now. In the middle of all of this loss, how do I find joy? What do I think about Jesus now? What do I think about my life now? And how do I worship God in the middle of this season? One of my close friends, she's a mother of 4, and she lost her husband right before Christmas.
Wow.
So I know for her, Christmas is specifically so difficult for that family. But I think no matter when you lost somebody or what kind of loss you went through, whether it was a house or a relationship or truly someone passed, that Christmas can sometimes be this, it can be hard, especially in comparing it to what other people are going through, and everyone's saying it's the most joyful time of the year and you feel like it's the opposite for you. I just want us to take some time to speak to those people. What do we say to people that are in the middle of a hard season during what's supposed to be the most joyful time of the year?
Yeah, growing up, I certainly relate to that. When my father had a massive cerebral hemorrhage and was not expected to survive. And my mom would come home from the hospital to Christmas decorations up in the house. And after my father was eventually hospitalized and then committed suicide, she had the hardest time putting any Christmas decorations up, because for her, it was just a reminder of that terrible time in her life. And I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13, sitting down with my mom one Christmas and saying, you know, Mom, because we were Scottish, and B, back then you don't talk about things, you just keep going.
Soldier on.
You just soldier on. And I remember sitting down with her and saying, Mom, I know this is hard for you to talk about, but Dad knew Jesus. So Dad is home free. Right. You know, Dad's celebrating. So I think I don't want your whole life, the rest of your life, to be marked by what was taken away. Let's make our life now about what we have. You know, that we have each other. We had very little money. We lost our home and things after my dad's death. So we lived in government housing. But I said, but we've got each other. And so I went that year and I bought a little tree and I put it up and I said, you know what? I know this might be hard, but let's celebrate, you know, because we're all still here. We all still love each other. We don't have a ton, but we have enough. And it was just making a conscientious decision to turn our heart away from loss toward the gift.
The greatest gift that we can give to the world as Christians is hope. You'd be surprised how many single parents live without hope, how many people that don't have a home, lost their children, lost their families, and they live without hope. Some of the people that are shut into their homes with no connection to a family, all the kids are grown and yet the kids don't go and visit mom and dad after they're old. They feel hopeless, they don't feel a connection. And I think us as believers, people that call themselves Christ followers, the way we exude our passion, our love, our hope into the world, it brings a level of enthusiasm to life. People live longer.
My friend Thelma Wells sets a timer. Her thing is, you know what? You can't ignore grief. Grief is real if you've lost someone. So she literally will set the kitchen timer for 15 minutes. And she'll say, okay, for these 15 minutes, I'm going to feel my feelings. I'm going to miss my mom. I'm going to, whoever it is. And then when the timer goes off, she's like, okay, Lord, we're moving on.
Moving on.
You know, that's powerful, not to ignore this real person in your life that wasn't just a dead person, not just, oh, you have to move on or you have to push through, but to have a moment to be you and really grieve. That's powerful.
And I think it's the firsts that are hard.
Yes.
You know, like for
Yeah,
me,
first
as
are
the
hard.
it was the first birthday after my dad died. It was the first Christmas. It was, and it kind of comes upon you suddenly.
Yeah, I know.
Or for me, it would, right? So because he made it a big deal. We all experience loss, and loss of friends, loss of jobs, perhaps homes. Yeah, and there was a season where when my dad, went to heaven, and it was a pretty sudden. His death was sudden, and in that same season, I kind of lost some friends, and so I was really processing the heartbreak of loss, and it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to grieve. You don't want to stay there forever, but it's okay. And so now when I see people who are grieving, who are dealing with loss, I am way more empathetic than I was before, because I navigated loss myself, and I know what that feels like and the heartbreak that is. Somebody's in loss, I don't rush them through it. I'm like, hold their hand.
Yeah.
Because I get it. I know what it feels like. And I just think maybe that's what we should be doing.
Right.
Just like looking where, if someone's grieving during Christmas or there's a loss, don't rush them past it so fast. It's just acknowledge that and go, I'm sorry.
I understand.
I understand that.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know what that feels
More
like.
empathetic.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the Holy Spirit is. He is the comforter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole piece of God that he wants to comfort us in our loss, because there is a time to mourn.
Yeah.
And the comforter has things for us in that time of mourning that can transform and do something inside of our hearts and lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we try to breeze by that, and and so my thought is always, you know what? They're not dead. They are so alive right now.
More alive
you know?
than they've ever been.
More
Yes,
alive.
I'm just going to miss them
Right.
so badly,
Right.
and so pushing past that. And I think what you even said in the beginning is just sometimes we can live in that loss, whether it's 1955
Right.
that I lost my spouse, and that still holds you in bondage today.
That's still your
that should
identity.
not
Yeah.
hold you in bondage anymore. And seeing things that I do have that I can be thankful for today, because a lot of times our loss can be a loss for those around us. Our children can suffer from our staying stuck in a place where God has not called us to stay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He says to rejoice in the Lord. That means to rejoy yourself in the Lord. And that is a process, and it does take time to be comforted, but then to be able to rejoy yourself
You
in
have
God.
to, because how you feel will dictate to you how you will behave.
Yes.
And so in order to feel better, we have to think better.
Yes.
And when we start thinking better about different things, then we can feel better,
Yeah,
and then we
as
will
a man
behave
thinks.
better.
I was reading in Psalm 77, and he says, I complained and my spirit was overwhelmed. So for me, when I read the Bible, I look at what is that saying to me. So I feel like so many times I've been overwhelmed, so maybe it's what I'm complaining about. So what am I complaining about? So even in processing loss or grief, it's like if there's this overwhelmed feeling, then what's coming out of your mouth? Are you, when it talks about give thanks in all circumstances.
That's powerful.
That's right, not for them, but in them.
Absolutely.
In them. So even in the midst of it, can find something to be grateful for. And that was probably the hardest journey that I went on. And, in these last 5 years, we just had one loss after the other, was that decision to be grateful, to find something to be grateful for. And the first day, honestly, it was coffee. Like, okay, I'm grateful for coffee. And then,
That's not a small thing.
That's powerful. It's starting something maybe more basic than you would imagine, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then eventually it became bigger things, but at first it was like coffee and sunshine and parachute, whatever. But just find something to be grateful now.
Yeah.
Right? So I think even as you process loss, I've watched people who become homeless, so they have lost a lifestyle.
Right.
Right? And I've seen them
So
find,
loss isn't what, even though we've been talking about death, loss isn't just about death.
Right. So you lose a lifestyle, you lose a job, you whatever it is, there's this loss. And so somehow, even in that, find something to be grateful for. You know, it challenges me to keep my eyes open for all kinds of loss.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
just death,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
loss of a lifestyle,
Yep.
loss of a job.
My favorite Christmas memory was the year that my father was let go from his job. That Christmas, we had no food, we had no Christmas presents, and we were on the verge of losing our house. There was a group of families from our church that binded together and brought us a turkey, some food, tons of Christmas presents, and till this day, it's markedly my favorite Christmas. Even though we have all those things now, that one goes down as the one we experienced the most and we had the least.
I remember when I was younger, there was a family in our church who lost their 2 daughters in a tragic car accident right before Christmas. And the girls were my age. And I remember we kept thinking, how are we gonna be there for this family? And I'm freaking out, you know, because I knew these girls, and my dad's freaking out because they were my age. And we kept trying to think how to be there for this family. And I'll never forget when this couple that lost their daughters came over our house. Our family wasn't well off. We rarely got Christmas presents. And they came with gifts for me, my brother and sister. Stacks of gifts wrapped up. And it was confusing
Right.
as a little kid what was happening. Here we were trying to figure out how to bless them. And so we had this big budget for gifts this year for our daughters, and we wanted to bless you guys.
Wow.
And they gave us these gifts, and they didn't make us feel bad that they had lost. They didn't give a monologue about what they were going through, just from their knowledge of what it was like to be without. From that, they gave. They gave these gifts, and it was a trip. And I never forgot. So when I lost my dad, and when I was 18 years old, from that place of grief, now you know what loss is like.
Right.
So this is not your opportunity to make other people feel bad that they have a dad. This is not your opportunity to make people feel bad that you had a harder childhood than them, and you're feeling sorry for yourself. Like, this is your opportunity from a place of knowledge, because you've seen death and you've survived through it, because you've seen grief and you've lived to talk about it. Compassion doesn't need to be something that we overthink. What's the right words? What's the right gift? What's the right thing to say? The fact that you care at all is what people want to see and want to feel. They just don't want to be alone. People don't want to be impressed. They just don't want to be alone. I think something that we can tend to do is get so in our heads about how to be there for someone. And if we don't get to the right place or get the right gift, then we just won't show up at all. Do not overthink being there for somebody. I'll never forget when my dad passed away, and all these people tried to give me the right gift and say the right thing, and it was overwhelming. And there was a girl in my college whose name I don't remember, who I don't think I've ever seen since, who opened the door for me when I was walking into my dorm room and said, "Hey, Hosanna, I heard about your dad. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling." And she started crying because she was so nervous. And she said, "I'm so sorry. I love my dad. I'd be so sad if I lost my dad. I'm sorry you lost your dad. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And she just cried. And then she left. And I just really appreciated that someone let themselves be uncomfortable to make me feel loved and seen. She didn't have the perfect words, but I remember that this stranger really cared about me enough for her to be uncomfortable.